Recording. Yes, good. Yes, another local foco. Yes. All right. I am so impressed by that. Where else are you going to find backgrounds of local focos? Nowhere. I'm hoping that's your wallpaper at home. But I did that video of the West. Remember, I did tell you the West is on Netflix. If you have Netflix, I have the copy on YouTube, but it's a little, a little pixelated. Great video, great series. We're going to watch that one. Does a good job with the Oregon Trail. That's why I just barely mentioned the carriage trade and the actual Oregon Trail. Does a good job. It's well done. And it's really entertaining. I like that series a lot. But we're going to, so that's an assignment that we do to try to get that done, turned in by Monday. And then we'll probably have a quiz over chapter 13 on Monday. And that'll be another one of those, no more than 1,000 questions. And so it should be pretty basic. 10, 12, pretty basic one. And that'll be about Manifest Destiny. If you remember, I said I'd give you a chance to do a couple of the short IDs. If you did not do well or as well as you had hoped on the test or your short IDs, but you have to ask me. A few people have, but if you don't ask me, I guess my assumption is you don't want to do it. So I think that seems pretty fair. Any questions then? Okay, let's get started. My computer's flipping back and forth and it was kind of driving me nuts during third period. So if my screen goes off, let me know. I don't know why that's happening, but let me get this off. Screen up. You should right now be seeing birds in Costa Rica, but now you should see John Wayne. Does everyone see John Wayne? Are we good? John Wayne. No one plays John Wayne better than John Wayne. So with that, so weird. Okay. And so we got the John Wayne. That's all we need. John Wayne. The next essay test will be on John Wayne. And that hat, you got to admit, that hat's pretty cool. That hat's pretty cool. And remember, Manifest Destiny, movement westward, the idea of spreading American civilization, very nationalistic, trade and then land, and that American dream about getting that little piece of land, but also diffusion to spread slavery out. And so you get some people who want more land, but worried about more slave states, and some who want both, and some so fearful of more slave states, they don't want land. That's why Manifest Destiny and slavery in the territories would be the trigger to civil war. Mexican independence in 1821, Santa Anna ending immigration, but also slavery would trigger the war for independence. So we got to Davy Crockett. I played you the song, right? I know you want to hear it again, don't you? Yeah, you'll get it. Don't worry, you'll get it. I will not let you down. So they would all be executed. So I think we got to, what a weird way to put it. So we had Goliad, and remember the Goliad, remember the Alamo. Runaway scrape, we got this. So when Santa Anna divided his forces, that allowed for Sam Houston to counterattack. And right here near Galveston, Texas, when Santa Anna stopped at a little bend in San Osito Creek, surrounded by trees on three sides, to take a break in the hot April sun, they took a siesta. This would lead to the Battle of San Osito, April 21st, 1836. That map right there, that is the painting that's at the actual battlefield. And this right here is supposed to be Sam Houston. They took the Mexicans completely by surprise. They were sleeping. They really didn't have pickets out. You can imagine the Mexicans really thought the war was over. Need a drink, sorry. And if I stop every once in a while, it's because something is blowing by in the wind. It is really windy out here. And if the two cats that were fighting out in the yard across the street from me start fighting, I will make sure I turn the camera so we can all bet. Got to do a little betting on the cats. But took them totally by surprise. and it was an absolute disaster for the Mexicans. This map tries to show it like an actual battle where they lined up and fought. It was just a free-for-all. The battle was over in just a few minutes. Of the 650 Mexicans who died, most of them died after the battle was over. They went running away, fleeing the Texans who were desperate for revenge after Goliad and the Alamo. Only 11 Texans were killed. This was a decisive victory. Santa Anna, in an effort to flee, was wounded and he was captured. These trees are mesquite trees. So think of them more like a big bush with really long, thin thorns that horses won't go through. And because of that, it was almost impossible when they tried to escape. And the Texans just cut them down in cold blood. Revenge. Now, once they got Santa Anna, in pain and agony, and also they gave him opium to smoke to deaden the pain, he would sign away Texan independence. I have a whole story with that, but since I don't have a board to draw on, all I have is Budapest. If I had the local focal sign, I could do it. But since I don't, I will wait. I will take a few minutes in class when we're actually back in the classroom, hopefully in a couple weeks, and I'll show you that picture. But Santa Anna would sign away Texan independence. And something just fell in the house. But Santa Anna would sign away Texan independence, and Mexico never accepted this. But since I don't have the actual drawing, or I can't draw this, I will show you a photographic reenactment of Santa Anna wounded by a cannon. Now, that's pretty much what happened. I know you want to see it again. You got to see it again. Yes. If we ever have a regular assembly back at school, yeah, that's it. That's what we're going to do. Oh, the next scene is a guy getting a block hit on his head. That's another battle. So Texas declared independence, and they're going to be the Lone Star Republic. The flag on the right's their first flag, but eventually they would adopt this flag very much like the flag of the United States. And that's the first actual Texan independent flag, the first of that model. The flag of Texas today, of the state flag, is that flag. When the Confederacy formed, that would be the flag of the Confederacy. And it would be the 3 stripes and then 9, then 11 stars. If you think of the Confederate flag, that's actually their battle flag. That's not the flag of the Confederacy. And this area in yellow is what Mexico claimed was the Republic of Texas, but Texas claimed all the area north of the Rio Grande, which goes well into what is now Wyoming. And that is a massive state. But the thought was for Texas, they're not going to be independent long. They petitioned Andrew Jackson, who was still president, and for annexation. But annexation, Jackson could not annex it because of the issue of slavery. Remember the Missouri Compromise and the number of slave states to free states. And the nullification crisis almost ended in civil war. And that was about slavery. And here, just 3 years after that, here comes Texas and they're slaves. They have slaves. This could be 6 or 7 slave states. Northern Democrats, along with Northern Whigs, were opposed to this. And so it was such a hot potato, nobody wanted to touch it, that in the election of 1830, when the election of 1836 happened, Texas was not annexed. And because of that issue, Texas is going to languish as a weak independent country for 10 years. 10 years. Now, the next slide I show you were one we've already had, so you do not need to write this down. I'm just reminding you of this election of 1836. Remember, we've had this. Van Buren's elected president. They avoided the issue of Texas. The Whigs divided up into 3. William Henry Harrison got the most, but Van Buren is president. Texas avoided. Now, Van Buren was actually very reluctant to annex Texas, but he knew a significant number of Democrats, including now former president Andrew Jackson, wanted this. But then his administration would be tainted. This part then we got to get the Panic of 1837. Van Rulen's Depression. Yes, he got a somewhat replacement for the bank, a treasury, sometimes called the sub-treasury system or the independent treasury, that would distribute money to banks. And that would survive in some form till 1913. But for the most part, Van Buren's administration was devastated by the Depression, but also just avoiding the issue of Texas completely. Now, his vice president, you don't need to know him, but I had to put down Richard Mentor Johnson. What a name, huh? Mentor. But Johnson, he had a great little poem about him because he was at the Battle of the Thames where Tecumseh was killed. And this would be chanted by Democrats during this campaign. Rumsey Dumpsey, Colonel Johnson killed Tecumseh. Rhymes perfectly, doesn't it? Rumsey Dumpsey, Colonel Johnson killed Tecumseh. Yeah, I know. There were rhyming issues back then. I just thought that was really funny. So, Van Buren's presidency, Texas, the panic would all come to a head in the election of 1840. So, Van Buren's the Democrat again, running for re-election. And the panic's the issue. I showed you this cartoon before. Now, this one's in color of the bank panic. Here, unemployed people, drunk unemployed people with the Jackson flag flying over. But he could not decide on Texas. He basically tried to straddle the fence on annexing Texas or not. And that angered Southern Democrats who wanted Texas and Northern Democrats who feared slave power. And so Jackson, he's already in trouble with the panic. So Van Buren is in real trouble. But the Democratic campaign still believed, hey, we're the party of the people. They will remember that Van Buren represents the common man, while the Whigs are the party of the elite. But the Whigs had a trick in store for them. The Whigs didn't like democracy, but they realized by 1840 it's here to stay. And so they nominated William Henry Harrison, old Tippecanoe. Why? The war hero, the general, and that's why I put in Jackson. He's just like Jackson. And they're trying to use the image of Jackson with going for Whig policies. So they completely avoided the issues, especially Texas. If anybody asked about Texas, the response would be the Battle of Tippecanoe. The Battle of Tippecanoe. Yet he did, everyone believed, and as it turned out, he supported Clay's American system. Remember, tariffs, I said tariffs and then protective tariffs. Tariffs, Bank of the United States, and internal improvements. The Democrats mocked Harrison because he avoided all issues and acted like he is a country bumpkin who, which also shows you their contempt for commoners when they made Harrison act like a dummy. But Harrison, as a puppet, being controlled by Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, two leading Whigs. And this campaign, Harrison would once again back to somebody I mentioned before, image. The Whigs tried once before, just a sec, I know it's gone, give me a sec. The Whigs tried once before Davy Crockett. This is actual painting of Davy Crockett from the 1830s when he was elected a member of Congress as this Westerner on the frontier, a fighter along the frontier. He killed a bear when he was only 3. This whole image of Davy Crockett so he could be like Andrew Jackson, but younger and support Whig policies. Now, Davy Crockett failed at that because, and remember, then he went to Texas to try to rehabilitate his image, got caught at the Alamo and executed. But this image of Davy Crockett would last for years. Here's a cartoon before the comic book before the Walt Disney show, and here's a Lego Davy Crockett. If we were at school, I would pull out, I should have brought it, my finger puppet of Davy Crockett. I'm so mad I didn't bring it. I will bring it out, the Davy Crockett. And that was their first attempt. The Whigs realized, Davy Crockett be the first attempt at this. The Whigs realized, we don't need to convince all the Democrats, just enough in enough key states to turn those electoral votes to Harrison. Portray the image of Jackson that they knew a lot of people liked, that Westerner, that no-nonsense frontiersman, the fighter, the general. Use that reputation to turn enough votes. Focus on the image, avoid the fact that he opposes everything that Jackson technically stood for, which is obviously controversial. But Crockett failed. Two more things about Crockett. Here is a Lego version, and I'm not sure if this is real or not, but I had to put it in there. In the 1950s, the United States Army named one of the most horrific weapons they ever made, one of the dumbest things the Army ever made, and boy, have we made a lot of dumb weapons. But it's called the Davy Crockett, and it was basically an anti-tank gun called a recoilless rifle that they could put a 5-kiloton nuclear weapon, that's 5,000 pounds of TNT, that this weapon only had a range of about 4 or 5 miles and was really dirty, so it put a lot of radiation out, a nasty weapon. But the Army wanted nuclear weapons. So the people who fired this would die a horrific death in a couple days if they survived the blast. And yet they built over 100 of these, and these were in West Germany during the Cold War to stop the Soviets. Unbelievable. I could not believe this. I was looking actually for the Davy Crockett Lego figure and found this, had to show you. Next, yes, I will play it. You are welcome.
Davy Crockett, the king of the wild frontier.
No, come back.
Born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, the greenest state in the land of the free. Raised in the woods so's he knew every tree, and killed him a bar when he was only 3. Davy Crockett, the king of the wild frontier. He fought single-handed through the Injun War till the creeks was whipped and peace wasn't stormed.
Okay. Yes, it was a #1 song. So, Old Tippy Canoe. Old Tip. Harrison will be the Jackson figure. He's a general, a war hero. He lives in the West. He could portray that Jackson, even though he was in the definition of elite. And 29 years after the Battle of Tippecanoe, they're still using his old nickname, and it meant something. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. One of the first great political slogans in history. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Old Tip, the war hero, the Westerner. Now, John Tyler would personify all the problems and the divide in the Whig Party. He was completely opposed to Henry Clay's American system. Completely opposed. He was a senator from Virginia. He actually left the Democrats because of opposition over the tariff, the nullification crisis, and he hated the democracy. He didn't believe Jackson was serious about the democracy. The only thing that made him a Whig was his hatred of commoners voting. But they chose him, even though he was against the head of the Whig Party, Harrison and Clay, their program, because what do vice presidents do? They break ties in the Senate. That's all they do. Oh, wait, they also wait for the president to die. This is what we call foreshadowing. Give me a sec. I have to check something out. Where's my mouse? Sorry, I gotta do. Oh, you get to see the roll sheet. Do you like it? I'm moving it. There we go. And give me 1 sec. I gotta do something with roll. I know. It's a pain. I want to make sure there's someone. I marked somebody. How do I mark somebody who's here absent? All right, good. So I hope you enjoyed that break. You got to see the creative process in action. So, and just wait for, and so no one ever really thought much about John Tyler. They just wanted to get Southern Whigs to support this. So they could, hey, he might be for a more Northern program like the American system, but he's one of us. And so that's why this is going to be called the log cabin campaign because it's all about image. A newspaper editor, John L. Sullivan, the same guy who coined the term manifest destiny. Sullivan would write in his newspaper an article bashing Harrison's campaign about voiding the image and just acting like a country bumpkin who doesn't really know what to do with government. And so in the article, it said basically, paraphrasing here, that Harrison would rather sit on the front porch of his log cabin sipping hard cider than dealing with the hard problems facing this country. So he's just saying he's acting like a dumb Westerner. Don't we want somebody like Van Buren who's been in government, somebody you can trust? But this played in perfectly. The Democrats played into the Whig strategy. The Democrats fell for the Whig trap because that's what Harrison wanted, that small, marginal group of voters that would vote for Harrison because of that image. And it worked. Next thing you know, they built a log cabin on his huge plantation, and he could act like this Westerner. Even though he was born of incredibly rich parents and a big plant, he still had a plantation in Virginia, a huge farm, they call them plantations, in Indiana, and a plantation in Kentucky. He was incredibly rich, born of the aristocracy, and yet he's acting like a commoner. So he would sit on this log cabin, and even though he didn't actively campaign, no one did, they did have interviews with him from his log cabin, but hidden behind the trees was his mansion. And that's where you get, here's William Henry Harrison with militiamen. Remember, Jackson had pictures like that. Hard cider, log cabin, the log cabin almanac. Just average people getting hard cider out of a barrel from William Henry Harrison. It worked perfectly. And the image would come to dominate this campaign. And this is the important thing. Image politics would become the way that elections are run. If you can portray the image, your candidate, of what people want to see. I take a drink. The substance didn't matter. Just portray the image, especially when you're only trying to appeal to that small group you can persuade to vote for him just based upon he's a Westerner. And from now on, other campaigns will follow this in some way. But this is the first real modern campaign. And so by the time you get to the 20th century with the modern technology of telegraph and telephone, easier printing, and then you get radio, television, and now what you're watching, the computer, image is everything. You could just bash people with image, and the reality of what they are doesn't matter. Think about both presidential candidates in this last election. President Trump was purely a candidate of image, portraying this image from his television show of this rough, hard-nosed businessman who doesn't care what people think. That whole thing about firing people because it doesn't care what the popular attitude is. He's going to get the economy rolling. He's a tough guy. And that's just this image of this, he's this elite guy. And then Joe Biden played this, try to portray this image of this serious politician who'll get things back to normal, to clean things up, somebody you could trust. And that is an image they portray that the reality is much more complex, but it's very successful. And then they could turn around and portray the commoner, Martin Van Buren, as the elite. So have you ever seen like a stereoscope? And it'd be one of those things where you look through two, I should have got a picture of this, but of course I always forget. You look through a little lens and look at a picture and it gives it kind of a 3D look. And you kind of flip it and turn to the next thing. This is an early one where they'd have a picture and this is the front. And they would look through this and they would flip it back and forth and give the illusion of 3D movement. And so here is one of Martin Van Buren. He's enjoying a beautiful goblet of White House champagne. Martin Van Buren. Here he is with the elite champagne, smiling. And yet here he is with an ugly mug of log cabin hard cider. The drink that commoners drink, and it's WHH, William Henry Harrison on it. And he's like, yeah, this is terrible. It's like he doesn't like what commoners like William Henry Harrison. And remember, he was the commoner. He was old Kinderhook, who came from nothing in upstate New York to become president. And yet they allowed him to be betrayed, or they allowed the Whigs to portray him as the elite. In fact, he would even get the game of the elite. In the White House, he had one of the first ever billiard tables in the United States. Kind of a big pool table without the holes in the corners. And I know what you're thinking. Pool, the game of the richest people in America. Okay, that sounds kind of funny now, but it worked very successfully. So they had the first modern campaign rallies. The Democrats kind of did this, but the Whigs took it to a show. They would have these huge parades. They had these big balls that they would roll through town called the Whig rolling ball. And they would get town to town, and they had slogans on it. They push it through, have a marching band, a big parade. On the ball, these silly slogans like the Democratic ball sent on, farewell, dear Van, not the man, to guide the ship, old Tip. And then they'd have floats with log cabins, people carrying log cabin signs. The first political buttons of a log cabin would come out. And then at the end of the parade, all the people would follow the parade, and the Whigs would have set up a massive barbecue, as you can see in this picture right here. Kind of a gruesome picture. But then barrels and barrels and barrels of hard cider and whiskey, and they would hand out cups to people saying, remember who gave you this alcohol. Vote for the Whigs. It was incredibly successful. And the Whig campaign in the old Northwest, which is now Illinois, Indiana, bought so much booze or so much whiskey and hard cider from one distillery in Illinois that the name of the distillery, which was a family name, would become synonymous with alcohol. I about said it, booze. So if you ever heard the term booze, it comes from the election of 1840. Now, booze means alcohol. And here's a cartoon showing Van Buren trapped in a log cabin. All these states look like they're going to go against him. The trap is caught, and Andrew Jackson can't get him out. Here's another one that's actually really funny. Notice how I always show Andrew Jackson as a kind of a cadaver looking, which, by the way, after being with a couple bullets in him and what he'd gone through, he kind of was cadaverish. But Van Buren and the sub-treasuries at Independent Treasury trying to get to the White House, but he can't get past the hard cider and log cabins, even with Jackson's help. And a couple things about this. First off, this strange pig-faced character right there, that would be a great Halloween mask, but you notice the pig-faced character? He's doing an insult. Some of you might have seen this before. He's got one hand behind his head, then he's holding up his nose like this, going, yeah. That's what he's doing. That was a major insult in 1840. And the Democrats were shocked. How could people fall for this log cabin stuff from this rich person? Van Buren's one of us. He's old Kinderhook. Do you see it? He's okay. He's all right. He's okay. He's old Kinderhook. That's where okay comes from. So you hear the term okay? Old Kinderhook. The election of 1840. And so when you see okay written out as O-K-A-Y, that came after the fact. So the election of 1840 gave us okay and booze. The Democrats were shocked. The image campaign worked. Harrison won a national victory in the Electoral College. Now, pretty big victory. 69 percentage points is a big victory in the really big victory in the popular vote. But look how big in the Electoral College. A huge Van Buren election defeat. In fact, he even lost his home state. And if you look right here, though, there's a third party coming. Remember, third parties don't have much power in a winner-take-all system. But an anti-slavery party is coming. We'll come back to that, so don't worry about it right now. But there's the election of 1840. A big victory for the Whigs. Now, the Democrats, they realized they were totally outmaneuvered. The Whigs won by no issues, all image. So the Democrats, of course, would double down and make themselves more issue-based and do what's right for the people. Okay, that's me being funny. Now, the Democrats adopted the issue-based thing too, and you'll see that throughout history. Both parties are going to adopt this, basically trying to fool that small percentage of voters. And we're not going to worry about that right now. So the inauguration. I see one of the cats. Okay, just went behind the house. I'll let you know if the cat fight starts. The camera will be turned. We'll get that. It's two black and white cats. They're pretty rough. So the inauguration was in March. It wouldn't be till 1933 that the inauguration would be in January. So President-elect Biden will be inaugurated January 20th, 2021. But this is March 4th, 1860. Did I say 1860? I'm sorry. They had to wait 20 years. March 20th, sorry, all that stuff now. March 4th, 1841. Now, Harrison wanted to achieve two things as inaugural address. First off, he is the oldest man ever elected president. In fact, give me one sec. I have to address something. Okay, took care of it. So here he is, what, 67 years old. And the oldest president then, he'd be the oldest president until Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. And then Trump was older than Reagan, and Biden's going to be older than Trump. But since he was so old, he wanted to prove that he was young, fit, and vigorous. So he's going to give the longest inauguration speech in history to this day to show that he could do it. And secondly, he wanted to prove that he was not a puppet of Henry Clay. So it is going to be full of his policy proposals and issues because they really attacked him for this. So it's going to be a very long, very dry speech, even for a time when people liked long speeches. And it was a rainy, sleety, very cold, pretty yucky day. But just a terrible day. But he didn't wear his top coat or his beaver felt cap because remember, he's young, fit, and vigorous. Now, he was already pretty sick and feeling bad when he gave the speech. But after standing in the sleet, he got even more ill. By the next day, he is delirious in bed with fever, and within a week, he is in and out of a coma after this speech. And, and a month into office, William Henry Harrison would be the first American president to die in office. And this was actually an absolute shock. This had never happened before. But remember, the Whigs picked somebody that the majority of the Whig Party, especially Henry Clay, who is right there, Henry Clay didn't want. And now he's president. And there's no vice president. There was no way to pick a vice president until they changed the Constitution with the 25th Amendment. And so it goes to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. It's next in line. But Harrison died, and now John Tyler. And that's a picture of John Tyler actually during the Civil War. And he would be married twice. His youngest daughter would die, in the 1990s. Gives you an idea how young Tyler was when he was president. Now, John Tyler came in. He was obvious he did not support the American system, but Henry Clay pushed it through the Whig-controlled Congress anyways. The big thing was an increase in the tariff. So they pushed through Henry Clay's American system because Clay just assumed John Tyler would not have the guts to go against not only what the dead president wanted, at least that's what we assume, but also Henry Clay, who in many ways was Mr. Whig, the leader of the party. John Tyler not only opposed this, he immediately vetoed it and sent it back. Now, they didn't have enough to override the veto. Whigs were furious, and so they sent it back again. And Tyler vetoed again. And by the summer of 1841, all the Whigs in his cabinet resigned except one, who stayed just because he was negotiating a treaty, and they kicked Tyler out of the party. Tyler was no longer a Whig. The Whigs essentially disowned him. Tyler is alone, especially because the Democrats hate him too. So he will be the second president in American history without a party. Without a party. George Washington didn't have a party. John Tyler didn't have a party. They didn't want him. His only allies were a cabal of Southern plantation owners desperate to save slavery. And there's John Tyler.
We can't see the PowerPoint.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Still there?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yeah, third period, he did it like 6 times in like a minute. So John Tyler, and the big thing John Tyler would have really wanted was to become president again. Yeah, that's what he really wanted. If he could become president again and show those Whigs who kicked him out, he needed an issue. And what would that issue be? Texas. Here's a map of 1837. By the way, look at this map. That gives you an idea how good the maps were, but here's Texas, right there. Texas. There's Sam Houston. Great picture of Sam Houston. He was the president of the Texas Republic, Houston. And the Texas Republic's in real trouble. The issue is pretty clear. After going into the 1840s, by 1843, 7 years as an independent country, Mexico wants them back. Nobody is moving to Texas. They have no population base. People aren't moving to Texas because what if Mexico comes back? They lose their land. And so they can't get people, that means they can't tax. There's not enough people to tax, there's not enough tax base, and yet they have debts. Now remember I told you about the debts before. Debts, independent countries issue bonds. But who would buy a bond from Texas? They might be taken over by Mexico again and can't pay back their bonds. So they had to give higher and higher interest. The point is this, Texas was in a debt spiral by 1843. So here you have John Tyler, who is desperate to find an issue to punish those people who oppose them, and Houston. So Houston needs annexation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from the United States. He needs annexation. And so back to the U.S. So he's going to start to push the United States. He's going to push him. And let's not get to there. So that is a perfect place to stop. That's it. Our last class before Thanksgiving. Any questions on this? We're about to get to a man blowing up by a 20-pound parrot. You can't beat that, 20-pound parrots. Okay, so any questions? So don't forget, quiz Monday, the West. The wind has now totally died down. So you're gonna have a beautiful Thanksgiving. All right, if there's no questions, I will see you guys on Monday. Hopefully it will only be 1 week like this, and we'll be back at least partially in class. A little bit of normalcy. All right, no questions? Have a great break. We'll see you Monday.